Hello and welcome back to the only channel that asks the tough questions, like why a school full of wizards couldn't figure out a better security system than a three-headed dog who loves lullabies. You know that feeling when you're on your 10th reread of the series and a thought just hits you, wait a minute, that makes absolutely no sense? From a map that should have ended the story in Book 3 to a certain bus-sized snake taking a tour of the castle's sewer system, the wizarding world is full of these moments. These are what we call plot holes, and today we are going down the Harry Potter plot hole iceberg, from the most benign inconsistencies to the holes so big they threaten to unravel the entire series. Now I know someone is already typing, it's just magic, who cares? And to you I say, what's the fun in that? So, buckle up, and let's start things off with Level 1. Peter Pettigrew on the map. I was thinking about which topic to put first in this video, and when it came down to it, I could not imagine any other way to start than with Peter Pettigrew and the Marauders map. We have probably all seen the memes. Fred and George have seen Ron sleeping with a man named Peter Pettigrew in his room for years and have never mentioned it. Furthermore, would not it have been cause for some concern to see a villain, murderer, loyal Voldemort servant, Peter Pettigrew, on the map roaming around the halls of Hogwarts? K.K. Rowling has addressed components of this, but honestly, I am not convinced. Let's hear from her first before we start judging. I can tell you, there is probably going to be a lot of judging in this video, so just hold your horses. She responds pretty directly as to why Fred and George did not respond to Peter Pettigrew showing up on the map. It would not have mattered if they had, unless somebody was very familiar with the story of Sirius Black, and after all, Sirius was not Mr. and Mrs. Weasley's best friend. Indeed, they never knew him until after he escaped from Azkaban. Fred and George would be unlikely to know or remember that Peter Pettigrew was the person Sirius had supposedly murdered. Even if Fred and George had heard the story at some point, why would they assume that the Peter Pettigrew that they occasionally saw moving around the map was in fact the man murdered years before? Fred and George used the map for their own mischief-making, so they concentrated, naturally enough, on those portions of the map where they were planning their next misdeeds. And finally, you must not forget that hundreds of little dots are moving around this map at any given time. Fred and George did not know everyone in school by name, so a single unfamiliar name was unlikely to stand out. Now, I do not know about you, but this seems awfully convenient. Fred and George did not think anything of it because they did not know Peter Pettigrew's name. I mean, sure, if it was just one name out of hundreds of other students' names, I would understand. But the map is explicitly used when there are not that many students wandering around. It is used at night, when the only people out and about are Filch, Mrs. Norris, a prefect here or there, and the occasional professor. Further, if they were sneaking around and using the map with any regularity for the first 3 years, they would have without doubt checked in on Ron. Even if he was just in his dorm room, they would have seen Peter Pettigrew's name amongst the names of maybe a dozen other students tops. They would know those names, and they would know Peter was not one of them. There are a few explanations people have offered. Some suggested that the original Marauders had specifically enchanted the map not to show their names. It sounds good on the surface. It would canonically make sense. They did not want to be seen if the map fell into the wrong hands, despite needing a very specific passphrase to work. There is only one problem. When we get to the Prisoner of Azkaban, we find that Snape has done this exact thing to track Lupin. Snape was slightly breathless, but his face was full of suppressed triumph. "You're wondering, perhaps, how I knew you were here," he said, his eyes glittering. "I've just been to your office, Lupin. You forgot to take your potion tonight, so I took a goblet full along, and very lucky I did. So we can throw out that suggestion. I think the most compelling argument I saw was that Peter had sunk so far into his animagus form that he was no longer a human, so the map did not track him. He was in a sense more rat than man. I do not know about you, but I kind of buy this one. I believe the only animal the map tracks is Mrs. Norris. We do not see it tracking Hedwig, for example, or Crookshanks. So maybe he just did not actually show up. I do not think we ever explicitly see Peter on the map in the books, so maybe the simple answer is that he just never actually showed up on it, and what we see is just a plot hole specific to the movies. The jury is still out on this one, so I would love to hear your thoughts. J.K. Rowling seems to imply that his name actually does show up. The twins just do not see it. So is that reasonable, or am I the only one that thinks it is a little bit off? Also, now that you have got a taste for what the rest of the video is going to bring, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking that little bell. Did you know that only 4% of you watching right now subscribe to the channel? It is so easy. It is just a little button click. We are almost halfway to 10,000 subscribers, and I know we will get there soon. Thanks for all the support. I appreciate all of you. On to the next one. The trace. The all-powerful trace, a charm that is responsible for stopping witches and wizards under the age of 17 from practicing any magic while not supervised by the faculty of Hogwarts. It is this charm that functions as a plot point for several books, advancing Harry's storyline for him at sometimes all too convenient points in time. But how does it work? And is it at all consistent? The most explicit explanation of the trace comes from Dumbledore, with Harry asking about several of Voldemort's first victims. These murders are also one of the key topics that people point to and yell plot hole. Let's first take a look at the conversation with Dumbledore. But how come the Ministry didn't realize that Voldemort had done all that to Morphin? Harry asked angrily. He was underage at the time, wasn't he? I thought they could detect underage magic. You are quite right, they can detect magic, but not the perpetrator. You will remember that you were blamed by the Ministry for the hover charm that was in fact cast by Dobby, growled Harry. This injustice still rankled. So if you're underage and you do magic inside an adult witch or wizard's house, the Ministry won't know. They will certainly be unable to tell who performed the magic, said Dumbledore, smiling slightly at the look of great indignation on Harry's face. They rely on witch and wizard parents to enforce their offspring's obedience well within their walls. What we see is a version of the trace that is not quite as exact as we might have originally been led to believe. Instead of it tracing an individual witch or wizard, it monitors their general vicinity. Past that, the trace does not really seem to do anything. It may notify the Ministry of Magic of some sort of infraction, but it appears to be up to the Ministry to enforce any laws around magical secrecy. I think the plot hole is really buried in this component, that the Ministry of Magic is not at all consistent with enforcing their laws. Harry seems to catch the blunt of every law. He is persecuted for the most minor infractions, even when he is not the perpetrator in the case of Dobby hovering some pudding at the Dursley house. This is such a minor spell to cause the infraction. But it is not really clear why this is different than any other underage witch or wizard practicing magic in their own home. The Weasleys are a prime example. Though I did not really find any exact quotes, I am almost positive there are examples of the Weasley children performing magic while in the Burrow over the summer. And honestly, why should not they? It is a bit like a student driver's license. Kids should be able to practice under the supervision of their parents, just like Dumbledore tells Harry. So instead, we are left wondering if somehow the presence of Muggles might be the underlying factor. The Weasleys are able to practice little bits of magic here or there because they belong to a pureblood family. Arthur also works at the Ministry, that might help. Basically, they have privileges that others might not have. Harry is surrounded by Muggles, so it might make sense that the trace would flag any magic done around him. Except he is not the only magical child that practices magic around Muggles. Think back to one of the first scenes on the train in Philosopher's Stone. It is our first interaction with Hermione, who opens by chastising Ron while he waves his wand around. "Are you sure that's a real spell?" said the girl. "Well, it's not very good, is it? I've tried a few simple spells just for practice, and it's all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased, of course. I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I've heard. I've learned all our course books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?" So Hermione, a witch born to two Muggle parents, is able to practice magic at home without any consequences. What gives? For some of these plot holes, I am going to give my best attempt at an explanation. But as a warning, these answers might not satisfy everyone. The best explanation I can come up with is that for 90% of the cases of underage magic usage, it does not trigger any consequences if the magic usage is in private and around non-Muggles. The Battle of Seven Potters. Let's transition away from the trace to something tangentially related, the Battle of Seven Potters. To tie it together, Mad-Eye Moody explains the need for them to fly on brooms in the following scene with Harry. The trace, said Mad-Eye impatiently. The charm that detects magical activity around under 17s, the way the Ministry finds out about underage magic. If you or anyone around you casts a spell to get you out of here, Thickness is going to know about it, and so will the Death Eaters. So that sets the stage. Harry is about to turn 17 when the members of the Order of the Phoenix show up at the Dursleys to whisk him away. Their plan to secretly get out of there in the dead of night is to have everyone dress up as Harry and make it as obvious as possible that they are fleeing directly into a swarm of Death Eaters. The section from the book as they take off reads, "Higher and higher they climbed into the sky, and then out of nowhere, out of nothing, they were surrounded. At least 30 hooded figures suspended in midair formed a vast circle in the midst of which the Order members had risen. I get that it was not a secret, if I remember correctly. Snape leaks the plan to Voldemort. But the manner in which they try to escape seems so unnecessary. Mad Eye decides they will all disguise themselves as Harry and fly away. But it seems to me like there were so many other options. We know a flu network, port keys, and apparating from the Dursleys is out of the question. The book tells us this much. Pius Thickness has gone over, which gives us a big problem. He's made it an imprisonable offense to connect this house to the flu network, place a port key here, or apparate in or out. But I have two problems with this. Harry is going off on his own. Does it really matter if he commits an imprisonable offense? It feels as though none of that matters in the middle of a war. But secondly, why not take a more subtle approach? They are clearly able to use polyjuice potions without triggering the trace, so why not turn Harry into like a random muggle or something? The further, and maybe I am wrong, but Harry should have just used his cloak of invisibility, right? Why not just throw it over your head, walk a mile or two down the road, and then use a port key hidden in the bushes? The only reasonable explanation I can think of for any of this is that it is written as an exciting plot point that gives K.K. Rowling a chance to expand upon the wand lore between Voldemort and Harry. Without it, we do not quite have the foreshadowing and build-up to the wand betrayal that happens at the end of the book. Otherwise, maybe Harry should have just tunneled down through the Dursleys' floor like he was escaping a prison cell. If he went that way, maybe Hedwig would still be alive. Werewolf process. Let's move now to a storyline that is pivotal to Book 3, but seems like it could have been entirely avoided just by checking the calendar or wearing a bulky sweatshirt. Remus Lupin is famously allergic to the full moon, or rather, he is affected by lycanthropy, the disease that transforms you into a werewolf during the full moon. You will remember the group has just captured Peter Pettigrew and are making their way back from the Shrieking Shack out from under the Whomping Willow. Here is where the scene picks up. A cloud shifted. There were suddenly dim shadows on the ground. Their party was bathed in moonlight. Snape collided with Lupin, Pettigrew, and Ron, who had stopped abruptly. Black froze. He flung out one arm to make Harry and Hermione stop. Harry could see Lupin's silhouette. He had gone rigid. Then his limbs began to shake. "Oh my," Hermione gasped. "He did not take his potion tonight. He is not safe." "Run," Black whispered. "Run, now." But Harry could not run. Ron was chained to Pettigrew and Lupin. He leapt forward, but Black caught him around the chest and threw him back. "Leave it to me. Run." There was a terrible snarling noise. Lupin's head was lengthening. So was his body. His shoulders were hunching. Hair was sprouting visibly on his face and hands, which were curling into clawed paws. Crookshanks's hair was on end again. He was backing away as the werewolf reared, snapping its long jaws. Here we see Lupin out and about on the evening of a full moon, and I do not know about you, but if I was afflicted with a disease that turned me into a murderous monster during a very regular and predictable cycle, you better bet that I would mark it on my calendar as "do not go outside if you do not want to go on a rampage." And I say this because I think this is the biggest part of the plot hole. What actually causes his transformation? This arc in particular, and really the origins of the Marauders and Animagus forms, is built around the fact that they had to keep Lupin company and make sure he did not hurt anyone while in werewolf form. But, and it is a big but, this section of the text makes it pretty clear that he transforms as he comes in contact with the light from a full moon, and not from the mere timing of the full moon. In other words, prior to this whole sequence of events, the moon was already full. It is just hidden behind clouds. When Lupin is down in the shack with everyone, the moon is full. It does not just become full as the clouds part. So if that is the case, it seems like he could have protected himself from the light of the full moon. An umbrella, a thick cloak, any type of light-blocking spell seems like it would have done the trick. Frankly, I am confused as to why or how Lupin allows himself to go anywhere on that day of the month. I get that he has to live his life, but so do other people that do not want to be attacked by a werewolf. Dates. If there is one thing you will find as you start reading about J.K. Rowling and her writing process, it is that she is terrible at math and apparently looking at the calendar. There are a number of situations throughout the series that make absolutely no sense or are otherwise impossible as soon as you start looking back at the previous year and the days of the week. As far as plot holes go, I rate this pretty low as it does not really disturb you while you are in the middle of reading. But nonetheless, this is a video about plot holes, so I need to at least mention a couple. The first and most common one that you will likely find people pointing out is the first day of school. According to every source I can find, the school semester starts on September 1st. That is, the Hogwarts Express explicitly boards at precisely 11 a.m. on September 1st. And after arriving to Hogwarts that evening involves the sorting of the first-year students, followed presumably by the first day of classes the next day. The only problem is, September 1st is not always on the same day of the week. It changes every year, just like every other date on the calendar. So, instead of being fixed to a day of the week, we have a train that boards on Sunday one year and then boards on Monday the next. So either the students at Hogwarts do not get weekends, or I guess it is always possible that they might get a short break if the train picks them up on a Friday, for example. The second example that I think is a little funnier actually happens on the very first page of the very first book. The series begins by following the point of view of Vernon Dursley on his way to and from work. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull, gray Tuesday our story starts, there was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. There is only one problem. It is not Tuesday. It is Sunday. We know this because Harry is about to arrive that evening, the night after his parents are murdered by Voldemort, and we know that date because Hagrid tells us. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you was all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You was just a year old. He came to your house and this one you can look up for yourself. October 31st of 1981 was a Saturday, which means Vernon is going to work on a Sunday. A plot hole made even more glaring because of the fact that Vernon is famously home on the weekends, enjoying the fact that there is no post on Sundays. And with that, let's move down to level 2. Bill the Secret Keeper. Now that we are into level 2, we can really get into the meat of it. I am talking about pivotal plot holes that really undermine the entire series. Among them are the underpinnings of Harry's entire backstory, his existence as a Horcrux, and really the murder of the Potters to begin with. Amongst the spells and tools in the wizarding universe, there are a few that exist as sort of Deus Ex Machina type spells. Spells that are sort of coveralls for plot points, things that solve all problems and explain away any questions. A few that come to mind are the Cloak of Invisibility, the Time Turner, and of course, the Fidelius Charm. A charm so powerful that it would render the subject entirely unfindable, no matter what. The one downfall of this charm was the requirement that there be a secret keeper. It is the one weak point in this otherwise unbreakable cone of secrecy. In the Deathly Hallows, we see the gang at Shell Cottage when they are interrupted by a surprise visitor, Lupin. There was a bang on the front door. Everyone's head turned toward it. Fleur came running out of the kitchen, looking frightened. Bill jumped to his feet, his wand pointing at the door. Harry, Ron, and Hermione did the same. Silently, Griphook slipped beneath the table, out of sight. "Who is it?" Bill called. "It is I, Remus John Lupin," called a voice over the howling wind. Harry experienced a thrill of fear. What had happened? "I am a werewolf, married to Nymphadora Tonks, and you, the secret keeper of Shell Cottage, told me the address and bade me come in an emergency." Did you catch that tiny line? You, the secret keeper of Shell Cottage. If Bill had never revealed the secret, there would be no way for anyone to ever find Shell Cottage. Bill also tells them just one chapter earlier that Arthur Weasley is the secret keeper for a Fidelius charm on the Burrow. So why then could not Lily or James Potter have been their own secret keepers for their own house in Godric's Hollow? It would have left no weak point that could have been exploited by Voldemort. They would have been safe for as long as they needed. I guess one question I am left with that might explain this plot hole is that we do not really know how far the protection of the charm extends. How large of an area can you protect? Could you hide a single person's existence in an entire city? Peter Pettigrew handcuffs. At the risk of some of these sounding just like complaints, let's talk a little bit more about Peter Pettigrew. He was a sort of nexus for the whole host of problems that happened throughout the series, and he plays a pivotal role in resurrecting Voldemort. Without Wormtail, there just would not be a living, breathing Voldemort. So why then, when the group has him captured, are they so lax about keeping him secured? They use handcuffs of all things to make sure he does not get away. Now let's imagine for a second that you have just captured Wormtail. Pretend you are Sirius or Lupin. You know Peter Pettigrew. You know what he is capable of. At the very least, he has mastered animagus magic, which is described as being pretty difficult to do. I think the audience, and apparently Sirius and Lupin, tend to underestimate Peter Pettigrew. He is, after all, a right-hand man of Voldemort. I do not think Voldemort would pick a bad or unskilled wizard to be that important in his organization. Think of Snape, for example. Snape is an incredibly skilled wizard. It would make sense that Peter is at least competent enough to magic his way out of some handcuffs. Let's go to the scene in question. The group is making their way back from the Shrieking Shack when Lupin begins to transform and Peter makes his move. Pettigrew had dived for Lupin's dropped wand. Ron, unsteady on his bandaged leg, fell. There was a bang, a burst of light, and Ron lay motionless on the ground. Another bang, Crookshanks flew into the air and back to the earth in a heap. "Expelliarmus!" Harry yelled, pointing his own wand at Pettigrew. Lupin's wand flew high into the air and out of sight. "Stay where you are!" Harry shouted, running forward. Too late, Pettigrew had transformed. Harry saw his bald tail whip through the manacle of Ron's outstretched arm and heard a scurrying through the grass. There was a howl and a rumbling growl. Harry turned to see the werewolf taking flight. It was galloping into the forest. "Sirius, he's gone! Pettigrew transformed!" Harry yelled. Why on God's green earth would they only use handcuffs? Why not stupefy him, or otherwise bind him with some sort of spell? You have Lupin and Sirius Black, an incredibly talented duelist and wizard, and they do not think to restrain someone they know is an animagus that turns into a small rat. They could have avoided basically everything from Book 4 onwards by just knocking him out. Honestly, I think I just need to move on before I get more annoyed. Mad-Eye Moody's Mad Eye. I mentioned it once before, the invisibility cloak. It functions in a way that gives Harry the ability to walk around anywhere and observe without being noticed. That said, once you introduce a powerful object like this into the magical world, you have to find ways to counter it. Otherwise, it would become the go-to solution for everything. It is obviously a powerful magical artifact, but how powerful is it? Dumbledore can apparently see right through it with a simple spell. We will wave that one away and just attribute it to Dumbledore being a very powerful wizard. But then we come to another person that can see through the cloak, Mad-Eye Moody. I guess it is not really him who can see through the cloak as it is his magical eye. What is the deal with that? Quite honestly, the backstory of his eye is never expanded on. We know that he lost his eye in a duel with a Death Eater, but we do not know how the eye was created, who created it, or even the extent of its powers. Because of a complete lack of substantiated information on the eye, instead, there are a few fan theories that seem to come up pretty often as you research. First is the idea that Moody made the eye himself. He is a powerful wizard after all. It might make sense that a powerful wizard would be able to create a powerful tool for himself. I only have one issue with this, though. I am not sure this would necessarily be in his wheelhouse. I guess it is a general issue I have with Harry Potter as a whole, is that there are not many specialists outside of the professors that teach a specific subject. Every witch and wizard can do a bit of everything, and nothing seems to be outside the reach of anyone with enough practice. There are exceptions, of course, but the most powerful characters can pretty much do anything. It would just feel more realistic if Moody would not have been able to make his own charm artifact. But going off that is probably the most common theory, that the eye was created in collaboration with Dumbledore and the Elder Wand. Dumbledore also gets the free pass of being able to do any type of magic he wants, just because he is Dumbledore. That said, this one tends to hold a little bit more weight for me, purely for the fact that the Elder Wand is involved, and maybe that is why Moody's eye is able to see through the cloak. Only something imbued with the power of a Deathly Hallow could bypass the powers of another Deathly Hallow. The most hand-waving theory, however, is that the eye itself is just some ancient magical artifact, something as old as the Deathly Hallows, just unnamed. These solutions are always so unsatisfying to me, though. You could say that about anything to satisfy the reader, but it does not make it a good answer. Deadly children's puzzles. 7 puzzles stand between you and the Philosopher's Stone. And by puzzles, I mean basically kids' games. The best and brightest professors have been tasked with protecting the Philosopher's Stone, an artifact that can demonstrably grant immortality, and the best they can come up with is a big dog, some ivy, a locked door, some chess, a troll, and a brain teaser. Who are these puzzles actually made to keep out? Students? Dumbledore knows that he is protecting the stone from Voldemort, so what is the point of these puzzles? I mean, if any random student stumbled upon Fluffy, it literally would have eaten them. So I guess Hagrid would have succeeded in stopping an intruder and also in killing a student. But I sincerely doubt Fluffy would have stopped an adult wizard that had the knowledge of and intention to steal the Philosopher's Stone, let alone Voldemort. If I am honest, the hardest puzzle for most people probably would have been the chess game. But one thing I am curious about here is if someone could have brute forced their way through these puzzle rooms. If someone went into the chess room and just started blasting, would it really have been able to stop them? What about the flying wings room? Alohomora would not work on the door, but I feel like some kind of big explosion could have done the trick. Then there is the troll. It was left out of the movie, probably because of how short of a section in the books it was. And then we have the potions puzzle room. Again, it feels like a powerful wizard could have just used some other kind of defensive spell and walked through the black fire. That said, Snape was actually a powerful wizard, so it is possible that the Black Flame was actually really dangerous. This was omitted from the movie as well. Here are the clues again if you want to try to pause and figure it out for yourself. Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. 1 among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting bidden in line. Choose, unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we will give you these clues 4. Okay? 3, 2, 1, time is up. It was the smallest bottle. If you got it, congrats. That also means any random witch or wizard probably could have figured it out as well. Not a great puzzle, Snape. And that lands us at what is probably the only actually effective puzzle. Dumbledore's. I do not know that I really realized the success criteria for the puzzle with the Mirror of Erised when I first read it 20 years ago. But apparently, you would only be able to get the stone if you saw yourself with it in the mirror and had no intention to use it. I will give it to Dumbledore. That one would have stumped Voldemort, I am sure. But that begs the question, what was the point of the other 6 puzzles that a bunch of 11-year-olds got through no problem? Basilisk in the Pipes. This is probably the most annoying one on this entire iceberg to me because it literally does not make any sense. The others you can kind of just explain away with magic, but this one is integral to the story, and yet I cannot find any reasonable explanation for it. So, the Chamber of Secrets. Surely you remember the size of the basilisk. Yes, I will admit up front that I think the movie exaggerated the size of it. In the book, Harry describes the basilisk as being as thick as an oak trunk and at least 20 feet long. That is, he sees the shed snakeskin that is at least 20 feet long. Quick side note, it is a little crazy when I go back and read these sections for quotes just how short some of these scenes are in the early books. I mean, this entire encounter with the basilisk is about a page and a half. From the point where the basilisk enters the chamber through the statue to the point where Harry stabs it through the roof of its mouth is less than 500 words. Most of the topics on this iceberg are longer than that. So this snake is the size of an oak tree and at least 20 feet long. Now the oldest oak trees I can find have a trunk diameter of around 10 feet. Let's back it down a bit and call this snake about 8 feet thick, or tall. I do not know how you measure what size a snake is, but its body would be taller than you if you were standing next to it. Point is, it is a big snake. So how is it able to fit in the pipes and crawl around the school? I do not care what kind of school this is, it does not have 8-foot diameter pipes running through all the walls. But how has the basilisk been getting around the place? Said Ron. It's a dirty great snake. Someone would have seen it. Harry pointed toward the word Hermione had scribbled at the foot of the page. Pipes, he said. Pipes, Ron. It's been using the plumbing. I've been hearing that voice inside the walls. That is what Hermione figures out, but it just does not make any sense. Also, presumably, the snake has to leave the pipes somehow in order to petrify its victims. How is it supposed to do that? The only possible explanation is that it comes out through the pipes in the girls' bathroom where the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is. But then what? Have you ever tried to fit a sofa through a doorway? Those are only like 2.5 feet wide, not 8. There just is not any world where there are not obvious signs of the basilisk roaming around the school every evening. And even if the students are not aware of what it is, you would think that Dumbledore would be able to identify the signs of a monster that he knows lives somewhere beneath Hogwarts. There should be snake slime everywhere. Multiple people probably would have caught a glimpse of it at night. It probably would have knocked over everything in the hallways. You get it. Please, someone in the comments make the basilisk make sense to me. And I swear to God, if you tell me the snake just shrinks down with magic, I will lose it. Okay, let's move down to level 3. Mysterious Thestral Magic. Likely one of the most hotly debated topics in the series. Thestrals seem simple at first, but lose that simplicity as soon as you think about it for more than 2 seconds, as we are told by Hagrid and Hermione. Don't worry, it won't hurt you, said Hagrid patiently. Right, now who can tell me why some of you can see them and some can't? Hermione raised her hand. Go on then, said Hagrid, beaming at her. The only people who can see Thestrals, she said, are people who have seen death. That's exactly right, said Hagrid solemnly. 10 points to Gryffindor. So let's get the obvious plot hole topics out of the way first. Why does not Harry see the Thestrals when he first gets to Hogwarts? I think this one is actually not so much a plot hole. I can understand the idea that he should have internalized his parents' death by that point, but he was also a baby. I am okay drawing the line at the age where you can actually form memories. That seems fair. The bigger plot hole is why does not Harry see them after Cedric Diggory dies in Book 4? The argument against this being a plot hole is that Harry has not fully comprehended Cedric's death by the time he left that year, that he was still processing, which is a fine argument, but it is undermined slightly when you have J.K. Rowling saying publicly that she did not want to start a new mystery which would not be resolved for a long time at the end of the 4th book. She decided, therefore, that until Harry is over the first shock and really feels what death means, he would not be able to see the Thestrals. After 2 months away from school, during which he has dwelled endlessly on the memories of the murder and had nightmares about it, the Thestrals have taken shape and form and he can see them quite clearly. So, even though this is a somewhat satisfactory explanation, I am still going to call it a bit of a plot hole. I get the feeling that Thestrals were not fully formed ideas until Book 5, and J.K. Rowling is justifying Harry's experience after writing the books. But that leaves us with one other question. What about after Harry dissolves Quirrell right in front of him? It is pretty clearly a death, isn't it? Crowing of a rooster. One of the smaller hidden details within the Chamber of Secrets is that there was actually a potentially very easy way for Harry to either completely avoid the basilisk or kill it with almost no risk to himself. Here is the excerpt from the book. Hermione's hand was clamped so tightly around the paper that Harry was sure he was going to tear it. While Ron kept watch, he tugged and twisted, and at last, after several tense minutes, the paper came free. It was a page torn from a very old library book. Harry smoothed it out eagerly, and Ron leaned close to read it too. Of the many fearsome beasts and monsters that roam our land, there is none more curious or more deadly than the basilisk, known also as the King of Serpents. This snake, which may reach gigantic sizes and live many hundreds of years, is born from a chicken's egg hatched beneath a toad. Its methods of killing are most wondrous, for aside from its deadly and venomous fangs, the basilisk has a murderous stare, and all who are fixed with the beam of its eye shall suffer instant death. Spiders flee before the basilisk, for it is their mortal enemy, and the basilisk flees only from the crowing of the rooster, which is fatal to it. Harry confirms a few paragraphs later. He scanned the page in his hand eagerly. The more he looked at it, the more it made sense. The basilisk flees only from the crowing of the rooster, which is fatal to it, he read aloud. Hagrid's roosters were killed. I mean, nothing gets past this kid, am I right? Unfortunately, Ginny did kill all the roosters, but that seems like a pretty small problem to solve if you are a wizard. Just conjure up another one. Surely McGonagall could have turned a teapot into a rooster for you to go fight the basilisk, right? I can just imagine how frustrating that would have been for Tom Riddle. The basilisk plops down into the chamber, and Harry starts fumbling with the sorting hat, and instead of pulling out a sword, he pulls out a rooster that immediately crows and kills the basilisk. I am actually surprised I have not seen any skits about this like 100 times. Harry could have immediately solved all his problems with magic. Gryffindor's Quidditch team. This one is pretty short and inconsequential, but this is a plot hole video, so I might as well bring it up, right? Quidditch, the sport that is sort of a big deal for the first few books, and is then completely forgotten about for good reason, I guess. They were busy fighting for their lives. Flying around on a broom looking for the snitch is probably not the greatest use of your time if you are trying to stop an evil mass murderer. That said, let's talk about Quidditch for a second. The whole sport just feels like it was an afterthought at every point in the book. Think about the Quidditch World Cup that happens at the start of Goblet of Fire. Victor Krum is the seeker for his national team and is regarded as one of the best players in the world. Let me remind you at this point that he is 18 years old. Now, I understand it is entirely possible for an 18-year-old to be good at a sport, but there is such a huge difference between a high school athlete and an adult professional athlete. It is like Quidditch is only allowed to be played by children. Speaking of which, why is the Gryffindor team made entirely of children? We have Harry as the most important role on the team as an 11-year-old. Oliver Wood is a 5th year, so like 15 or 16, and he is the oldest kid on the team, I think. Fred and George would have been 3rd years, so like 13 years old. A couple of other team members might be 14 or 15, but where are all the 7th years? Are they all just too busy to care about this game anymore? Hogwarts student population. How many students are there at Hogwarts? It is a simple question, but you would never guess how wild the answer is. You see, J.K. Rowling was asked this question back in the early 2000s, and her quick response is that there are about 1,000 students at Hogwarts. 1,000. Okay, let's do a little math. We will start top down. We know that there are 7 years of students at any given point in time, which means that each class should contain about 140 students. We also knew that there are 4 houses, and I would assume that the classes are divided somewhat evenly between those 4 houses. That gives us about 35 kids per house per year. Now let's think about what else we know. Harry's class contains about 40 students total, meaning that only 10 students per house, 5 boys and 5 girls, exist. And that basically tracks with what you see in the book. Unfortunately, it does not track at all with the supposed size of the school. If each class was only 40 or 50 students large, you would have a school with only 350 students. There are a couple of things in J.K. Rowling's defense here. She is admittedly just bad at math, so she is probably just bad at estimating when she says 1,000 students. She also says that while she imagined that there would be considerably more than 40 students in each year at Hogwarts, she thought that it would be useful to know a proportion of Harry's classmates. What I have an issue with is something much larger and more impactful: the wizarding world as a whole. Imagine that there may have been 3 other schools in the UK, Ireland, and Scotland feeding adult wizards into society. Heck, pretend they have 20 schools. That still only means 1,000 new witches and wizards in adult society each year. That is like 1 class from a small college. That just is not nearly enough to maintain a society. Think about when Harry goes to the Quidditch World Cup. They walked through the woods for 20 minutes, talking and joking loudly, until at last they emerged on the other side and found themselves in the shadow of a gigantic stadium. Though Harry could see only a fraction of the immense gold walls surrounding the field, he could tell that 10 cathedrals would comfortably fit inside it. "Seats 100,000, said Mr. Weasley, spotting the awestruck look on Harry's face. 100,000. That is so many people, and it would imply a population much larger than 100,000, as I would assume that only a small fraction of non-Muggles attend a Quidditch match, even the World Championship. I do not know how much more math I can really do, but the point is, none of this math makes any sense. There are not enough graduating adult magic people to support Magic Society. It might make sense if everyone works in Diagon Alley, but if everyone works there, there is no way they could fill up a stadium of 100,000 seats. Someone make it make sense. Wand allegiance. One of the defining moments in Deathly Hallows is the ownership of the Elder Wand. It is a central plot point to why Voldemort is defeated in the first place. The wand belongs to Harry, and thus it refuses to kill him. So, Draco disarms Dumbledore and becomes the owner of the Elder Wand. And then later on, Harry disarms Draco, but Draco is not holding the Elder Wand. It is buried with Dumbledore. So apparently it knows that Draco is a little punk and lost to Harry, so it chooses to change its allegiance. We know that the Elder Wand is exceptionally fickle, changing allegiance with the smallest opportunity. But it makes me wonder more about the rest of the wands in the series. K.K. Rowling has since posted a very detailed article talking about all the different types of wands and the personality traits of each, but I kind of just want to ignore it. I get the feeling that it is written almost entirely with the express purpose of getting kids to purchase toy wands. Let's stay in the world of what-ifs for a moment longer. We know that some wands are prone to changing allegiance. And while a practice duel might not trigger this change in alliance, there are certainly real fights that students have with each other. You would think that there would be students that lose ownership and allegiance of their wands over time. Also, what about all the battles with Death Eaters that take place in the last couple of books? Harry literally fires off Expelliarmus every other page. He must be the true owner of 100 different wands by the time we get to the end of the story. And while we think back on all the Death Eaters that must suddenly be disappointed by a wand that no longer listens to them, let's move down to level 4. Barty Crouch Jr. Portkey. At this point, we have had about 15 other plot holes in this video. Let's break it up with one that is not actually a plot hole, at least not as far as I can understand. I actually started researching this, intending to write a bit about it as it being a fairly obvious plot hole, but the more I dug into it, the more I realized that might not actually be the case. Goblet of Fire ends with Harry racing through the hedge maze and teleporting along with Cedric to the graveyard through the use of a surprise portkey at the center. Barty Crouch Jr. is the one that plants this portkey in the maze with the purpose of getting Harry Potter out of Hogwarts and in front of Voldemort. Why, though, does he wait all the way until the final event of the Triwizard Tournament to whisk Harry away? Surely there would have been plenty of other opportunities to kidnap Harry and send him to the graveyard. But I think there is a key point that is being overlooked here. The whole idea was that Voldemort's resurrection was supposed to be a secret. Voldemort wanted to rule from the shadows, so stealing Harry in broad daylight and using him to resurrect Voldemort would have defeated that purpose. So how do you bring Voldemort back in secret? Surely, no matter what you do, if you bring Harry there, he is just going to blab to everyone that Voldemort is back the second he returns to Hogwarts. So that is why I think there is a bit of an insidious plotline hidden there that people do not really think about too much. Harry was very clearly supposed to go to the graveyard in order to bring Voldemort back, but Harry was not supposed to return to Hogwarts, at least not the Harry that we knew. I think the actual plan was for Voldemort to kill Harry, and then through the use of a polyjuice potion have someone, maybe Wormtail, disguise themselves as Harry, return to Hogwarts, and leave for the summer. That would have given Voldemort ample time to gain strength over those few months, and when Harry did not show up at the start of school next year, he likely would have had another month or so before anyone really figured out what was going on. So, in the end, Barty Crouch Jr. does not kidnap Harry Potter early in the story because it would not have been in accordance with the plan. Hermione memory spells. Hermione is always the smart one, but even she loses track of things on occasion. So who can blame her? They have a lot of stuff going on, which is maybe why in the Deathly Hallows she completely forgets that she knows how to perform some magic that she just did a few chapters earlier. Early on in Book 7, we see that Ron and Hermione have agreed to join Harry on his mission to find Horcruxes and defeat Voldemort. The first step for Hermione in doing this is to wipe her parents' memories, and in fact, their entire identities. I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced that they're called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia, which they've now done. That's to make it more difficult for Voldemort to track them down and interrogate them about me or you, because unfortunately, I've told them quite a bit about you. That is a smart, albeit very sad plan, but she is clearly skilled enough with the magic to implant a few completely different ideas in her parents' heads and have them fully accept it. That is why it is all the more confusing later in the book, when they are ambushed by some Death Eaters, and Hermione blanks on her skills entirely. At this point, They have disarmed and subdued the attackers, and Ron and Hermione are figuring out what to do with them. "What are we going to do with them?" Ron whispered to Harry through the dark. Then, even more quietly, "Kill them? They'd kill us. They had a good go just now." Hermione shuddered and took a step backward. Harry shook his head. "We just need to wipe their memories," said Harry. "It's better like that. It'll throw them off the scent. If we killed them, it'd be obvious we were here." "You're the boss," said Ron, sounding profoundly relieved. "But I've never done a memory charm." "Nor have I," said Hermione, "but I know the theory." "I have never done a memory charm? Nor have I? What? You literally wiped your parents' memories completely just a few weeks ago. What do you mean you have never done a memory charm?" There is not really all too much to read about this one. I think it might just be a case of overlooking a line of text in the editing phase. It is always possible that this line was written before the section about Hermione wiping her parents' memories as well, meaning maybe J.K. Rowling just did not remember that Hermione mentioned not having done a memory charm later in the book. Then, when she writes the part about Hermione wiping her parents' memory, she just forgets and thus creates a plot hole. Overall, I would put this plot hole in the inconsequential category. Platform 9 3/4. There are few things that stick out or are as memorable as Platform 9 3/4. It is quite literally the start of both Harry's and the reader's journey to this magical world, and something I do not think that I would ever forget. Which is all the more reason that it strikes me as so odd that another character who has been attending this school their entire life does not seem to remember how to get to the train. Harry swung around. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing a trunk like Harry's in front of him, and they had an owl. Heart hammering, Harry pushed his cart after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear what they were saying. "Now, what's the platform number?" said the boy's mother. 9 3/4, piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand. "Mom, can't I go?" "You're not old enough, Ginny. Now be quiet." "All right, Percy, you go first." That is right. Molly Weasley, of all people, does not remember where platform 9 3/4 is, even after literally sending her kids to school through the brick column hundreds of times. I mean, think of all the holiday breaks, the first days of school, not to mention her time as a student. How could she ever forget 9 3/4? The only explanation I can think of, and it is a somewhat interesting but rather benign one, is that the platform has changed over time. Think, for example, about what would happen if the Muggle side of the train station decided to change around where its platforms were. That does not seem out of the question. So the best explanation I can think of for this is that every year parents also get a letter in the mail from Hogwarts doing a little house cleaning. I would imagine it has new rules, many probably inspired by the shenanigans of Fred and George, and also instructions for the upcoming semester, including where they can find the platform for the Hogwarts Express this year. Harry the Horcrux. All right, I have saved what I think is the best for last, a topic so dark that J.K. Rowling was forced to remove it from the book, but in doing so, I think has created a plot hole that rocks the foundation of the series. Horcruxes are all at once both simple plot devices and also responsible for some of the most hotly debated fan theories in the series. At the center of it all is one that, I will be honest, I do not really have an explanation for, so I will need your input for it. Why exactly is Harry a Horcrux to begin with? Let's back up and have Dumbledore give us some context. Dumbledore took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Tell him that on the night Lord Voldemort tried to kill him, when Lily cast her own life between them as a shield, the killing curse rebounded upon Lord Voldemort, and a fragment of Voldemort's soul was blasted apart from the whole and latched itself on to the only living soul left in that collapsed building. Part of Voldemort's soul lives inside Harry, and it is that which gives him the power of speech with snakes and a connection with Lord Voldemort's mind that he has never understood. Dumbledore claims that when Voldemort's spell rebounded, it blasted a part of his soul from the whole, and that the piece of his soul latched onto the only other living soul in the building, Harry. Normally, I might accept this explanation, but seeing as it is the cornerstone of the entire series, I feel like it needs a little more to back it up. Specifically because J.K. Rowling describes, or at least hints around the edges of, what is required to make a Horcrux. I see it as a series of things you would have to do. So you would have to perform a spell, But you would also, I do not even know if I want to say it out loud. I know that sounds funny, but I did really think it through. There are two things that I think are too horrible actually to go into detail about. Important here is that in order to create a Horcrux, there is a series of things that you would have to do. It is not just as simple as murdering someone, as even though it might be rare, they have a spell that does exactly that. It is not like it would not happen, and you do not see every random serial killer creating Horcruxes left and right. So it must involve some type of process. Further, the only thing I can think of is that the process must also involve in some way the body of the person that is being murdered to create that Horcrux. That is just the only thing that makes sense, especially if J.K. Rowling is hinting that it is depraved enough to make her editor want to vomit. The offshoot of this, however, is that I do not think Voldemort did this series of things with James and Lily Potter. He just walked in, killed them, and then tried to kill Harry. So in essence, there was no preparation done to make a Horcrux, so I do not think one should have been created. Maybe Voldemort's body should have just turned into smoke like the end of Philosopher's Stone and flown away. But I do not think it should have attached to Harry in the way that it did. But there is no time left to think about it. We are at the end of the iceberg. This is probably my longest iceberg video yet, so I am hoping you are liking it, and I am hoping you are finding the content engaging all the way through. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What was your favorite? What plot holes did I miss? If you are looking for more content, I have got a bunch of other icebergs on the channel. Lots about Harry Potter, but also some about other fictional series like Star Wars and Game of Thrones. Check them out. And that does it. As always, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.